Hello, I'm KMcCray, and I will be guiding you through the importance of culturally competent assessment in counseling. As we've been studying texts this last 8 weeks provided through Counseling the Culturally Diverse Theory and Practice by Daryl Wing Sue, David Sue, Helen A. Neville, and Laura Smith, Chapter 11 has become a particularly relevant chapter for me as it discusses the culturally competent assessment and what that means. This presentation is deeply rooted in both the academic understanding of this topic and my own lived experiences. And in that, we will be covering 3 key areas: the importance of cultural assessment, essential elements of culturally competent assessment, a summary of the author's framework for culturally responsive practice. By the end of this, I hope you will not only understand what culturally competent assessment looks like, but also why it is essential in creating therapeutic environments that foster trust, inclusion, and healing. Key point 1. Let's start with the why. Why is cultural assessment important? First and foremost, it leads to more accurate diagnosis and treatment planning. When clinicians recognize that a client's cultural background influences how they express distress, they're less likely to misdiagnose or overlook core issues. Second, this is not a one-sided process. A culturally competent assessment invites the client into the conversation. It is collaborative. This honors their beliefs, their values, their worldview, and that respect creates a foundation for more effective outcomes. Finally, therapists have to do their own work to help discover themselves. That means reflecting on their own biases, assumptions, and worldviews. Cultural competence is not just about understanding the client, it's about checking ourselves so our clinical judgment isn't clouded by stereotypes or implicit bias. The American Counseling Association and the American Association of Christian Counselors Code of Ethics were developed to aid us in the opportunities to share our space ethically with someone else whom we are attempting to lead through guidance into healing. From a Christian's perspective, the importance of culturally competent assessment creates a safer environment that is sensitive to the person as a whole, not only as the individual sitting before us. The AACC provides ethics in Section E, highlighting the importance of these ideals, the importance of collaborating with clients, as well as the culture needed to move forward. This could be their blood family, their chosen family, spiritual family, what kind of rituals happen within their lives and those families. Whatever is necessary to aid the client toward healing without causing harm and without causing shutdown toward therapy and their own personal healing. Setting aside for a moment the ethical responsibilities that identify the importance of being culturally competent while providing an assessment, it is of great benefit to the counselor to understand the laws and rules that govern counseling, such as how the Texas Board mandates the counselor. And we see under Section 465.9 of the Texas Behavioral Executive Council and Texas State Board of Examiners of Psychologists, Rules and Statutes, such a mouthful, it shares that it is a rule of practice to be competent. Be competent in all things for which you will encounter. And if you are not, get competent prior to harming an individual in your care. It is required that you are skilled and trained in an area with which you intend to share healing. That means being culturally aware, culturally sensitive. Don't take a chance and harm someone who trusts you without knowing you. You may do harm to them and yourself. Key point 2. Now let's dig into the how. What makes an assessment culturally competent? Well, first up, therapist self-awareness. We have to ask ourselves, what are we bringing into the room? Our biases and cultural assumptions impact how we interpret what we see. We can't afford to ignore that. It's important for ourselves. It's important for our client. Second, recognize context. Clients do not live in a vacuum. Their culture, their environment, the stressors they carry from poverty, racism, or displacement, all of that shapes their experience. And it has to be part of the assessment. Third, collaboration again. Assessment isn't about telling the client what's wrong. It is about working together to understand what's happening. When we empower our clients to be co-creators in this process, the results are so much more accurate and definitely more respectful. The DSM-5's cultural formulation interview is a very useful tool that we have. It helps clinicians assess cultural identity, meaning of illness, and environmental stressors throughout the client's eyes, not just the old Western clinical lens. Finally, we have to actively avoid diagnostic errors. Again, that means watching for bias. That means no stereotyping, no faulty assumptions like diagnostic overshadowing, where we might miss the real issue because we attribute everything to one diagnosis. This connects to the ethical codes of the ACA. In Section E, we see a call to counselors to understand their own selves in E.5.B and E.8, while also maintaining an awareness of and responsiveness to a client's background. We're also providing that same responsiveness to the socioeconomic status from which they come. These sections, they underscore the need for cultural sensitivity to prevent harm. That harm could come as a result from negligence or lack of awareness. So it's very important that we provide a culturally competent assessment. Key point 3. In their work, Sue and colleagues, they challenge the traditional assessment practices. They show how standard clinical tools often ignore the complex realities of identity, of oppression, and of social context. Instead, they offer a model that is dynamic and client-centered. It isn't about ticking off boxes or memorizing facts about different cultures. It's about curiosity, it's about humility, and about being open to learning from every single client. They're not the same. Sue and colleagues argue that the cultural competence it's not a destination, it's just a continuous ethical practice, a continuous ethical learning. One that asks us as clinicians to constantly reflect, adjust, and advocate for assessments that consider the whole person, their culture, background, and environment included. We don't want to leave anybody out. We don't want to leave any area out. And practically speaking, this means revisiting our intake forms, our diagnostic frameworks, and even, our initial impressions. While we don't want to diagnose from our initial impressions, we do have to take everything into consideration. And that means building assessments that are just as diverse and nuanced as the people that we serve. So, conclusion, why this matters to me. I deeply agree with the author's emphasis on culturally competent assessment because I've lived what it feels like when it's missing. Although I am an ordinary Caucasian woman, I actually grew up in middle-class poverty, the definition of which is we were too poor to go without assistance, but we were about $1 above poverty, so we weren't allowed or provided assistance. I think the best assistance that we got was discounted lunch in the cafeteria. Not free, just discounted. So with my mom being the mother of 3 and no spouse in the home and very little spousal support, if any at all, this is where we were. Middle-class poverty. We were surrounded by a varied multicultural community. It was very unique and interesting, and no matter which direction you looked, you were going to see a different cultural group of people. I am 56 years old, and I have touched down in therapy since I was 16 years old. That means that I went a couple of times, and then I stopped for years and years and years until I decided it was time to go back and see if I could find anything new. Finally, at 56 years old, I have found a therapist that actually sees me, that sees everything that there was about me, and where we need to begin and what we need to do to get there. In therapy, I've been seen as someone who I appeared to be in that moment, well-spoken and educated, but not ever was I seen for who I am or what I had overcome to get where I am today. Therapists missed important parts of my story because they didn't ask, so be sure to ask questions. That misalignment affected everything. It affected diagnosis, treatment, and longevity. The client isn't accurately assessed, they may not get the care they need, or worse, they may stop seeking care altogether. This is personal for me. I've witnessed how cultural blindness in assessment can delay or deny essential support, and I've also seen how powerful it is when a therapist makes the effort to see the full picture. So, yes, I agree with Sue and colleagues when they say that culturally competent assessment is not optional. It is a clinical necessity, an ethical mandate, and a human responsibility. Thank you for listening. My references were from the American Association of Christian Counselors 2023, the American Counseling Association 2014, Sue, Neville, and Smith 2019 through Counseling the Culturally Diverse Theory and Practice, and the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council of 2025, Statutes and Rules.